Revealing a secret can be one of the most dangerous things a person does, depending on the seriousness of the secret. Some people will spend the rest of their lives fearing the consequences of revealing the truth, but others quickly disappear, leaving behind families looking for answers. Number 10. Constantine Vulov risked a lot in his attempt to defect from the Soviet Union. He'd only just begun revealing his secrets when he vanished without a trace. The British Secret Services first heard of Vulov in 1945. Less than a year later, Vulov had begun working as vice consul at the Soviet consulate in Istanbul. According to Vulov, it was a cover, and he was secretly the deputy head of the NKVD, or Secret Services, in Turkey. In August of that year, he sent a message to his counterpart in the British consulate, asking for a meeting. At first, the staff of the British consulate thought this was a prank, and they were shocked when Vulov later walked into the consulate to demand the meeting in person. Vulov revealed that he was an NKVD agent and that he was willing to defect for money and political asylum for himself and his wife in the UK. He clearly had a lot of secrets and claimed to have a whole suitcase full of documents that had been stolen from the British at his home. But he needed reassurances that his defection would be rewarded. According to Vulov, the information that he was going to hand over wasn't just going to put himself and his wife in danger. It was also putting his family in danger in the Soviet Union. So he wanted to be properly rewarded. Among the information Vulov claimed to have was the list of hundreds of spies in Turkey and the UK. He claimed 3 in particular would be of interest to the British. 2 were British diplomats in the Foreign Service. The 3rd was a man with a high-ranking position in the counter-espionage section of the British Secret Intelligence Service. He also warned that the Soviet Union had cracked the codes British diplomats used to communicate, and insisted any communication about himself had to be done by diplomatic bag. The staff in Turkey didn't know what to do with this information. They had to send to London for instructions. Vulkov's insistence on using a diplomatic bag meant it took over a week for the information to make it back to London. There, the case was turned over to a man named Kim Philby for consideration. Philby told his bosses that he would need to take time to consider the information and then travel to Istanbul himself. He arrived in Istanbul 3 weeks later, confirming that the information would be useful and that the SIS wanted to talk to Vulov. The problem was, by this point, Vulov had vanished. He was allegedly last seen heavily bandaged and being taken aboard a flight to Moscow with his wife. But the people at the Soviet consulate claimed to have no knowledge of anyone named Vulov. Nobody has heard from him since, and his fate after he reached Moscow remains a mystery. Number 9. In October of 1986, Britain's Sunday Times published an article revealing details of a top-secret Israeli nuclear facility. The information had come from a former technician at the plant in the Negev desert. By the time the article was published, the source had disappeared without a trace. Mordechai Vanunu is remembered in Israel today as the atomic spy, but he never started his career at a nuclear research center with any intentions of revealing anything secret. Mordechai had been born in Marrakesh, Morocco, but moved to Israel with his family at a young age. He had a typical upbringing and briefly studied physics at university. In 1976, he started working at the Negev Nuclear Research Center as a technician. At first, Mordechai didn't cause any problems, but he gradually grew concerned about his interests outside work. He had joined left-leaning groups and organizations that didn't agree with the government's handling of various issues. One of these was the Movement for the Advancement of Peace. Exactly which organizations Mordechai was a member of or associated with became unclear after his disappearance. One thing that was clear was that Mordechai had become unhappy with Israel's nuclear weapons program. While many countries around the world believed Israel had atomic weapons of some kind, Israel itself kept that information a closely guarded secret. It maintained nuclear ambiguity, where it refused to confirm or deny the existence of the weapons. Mordechai believed this wasn't right. Starting in 1985, he began to secretly take photos inside of the plant where he worked and sketched diagrams of things that he could not photograph. He was made redundant later that year as part of government spending cuts. He initially traveled to Australia, where he intended to settle down in Sydney, but eventually decided it was time to come forward with the secrets that he had. Mordechai went to the UK, where he met with journalists from the Sunday Times. They questioned him extensively, extracting as much information as possible. Rather than simply publish a story based on Mordechai's recollection, the journalists took his photos and testimony to nuclear experts. They wanted to verify what he was saying. All the experts who went confirmed that the information appeared to be legitimate. If what Mordechai was saying was true, they estimated Israel was the 6th most well-equipped nuclear power in the world. While his story was being verified, Mordechai was becoming restless. By the time the newspaper was ready to publish the articles, their source was nowhere to be found. The police determined that Mordechai had left his hotel on September 30th and hadn't been seen or heard from since. The article was published around a week later, and rumors began to spread about his disappearance. Most believed that the Israeli authorities were behind the disappearance, but it was unbelievable that officials would carry out an operation on foreign soil without informing the government of that nation. For weeks, questions were asked in the UK Parliament about Mordechai's disappearance, until he finally re-emerged in Israel in November. Mordechai was not permitted to speak to the press that had gathered as he was taken to court. He was able to pass on a message by writing on his hand and holding his palm against the van window. It read, "Venunu M was hijacked in Rome, Italy, 30th of September, 1986. While in England, Mordechai had met an American woman calling herself Cindy. She'd invited him on vacation to Rome. After arriving in Italy at 9 p.m. on the day of his disappearance, he was taken to a taxi where 2 Mossad agents were waiting. Mordechai was then knocked out and taken to Israel by boat. Cindy had been an undercover agent. Mordechai was tried in a secret trial and sentenced to 18 years in prison. Most of those were served in solitary confinement. Number 8. On February 13, 2001, Patricia Viola vanished from her home in Bogota, New Jersey. The day before she disappeared, she had told her friend that she had something important and complicated to confide in her. Patricia never got the chance to tell her friend what was on her mind that night. She vanished mysteriously and remains missing more than 20 years later. Patricia was a mother of 2 living with her husband Jim at the time of her disappearance. She was going through a stressful time, looking after her ill mother-in-law and dealing with her own health problems. She'd recently had her license taken away after suffering an epileptic seizure. A third stress in Patricia's life was her sister-in-law Donna, who was staying with the family. Donna would smoke in the house, which was frustrating for Patricia. The day before she vanished, Patricia had found cigarette burns on the guest bedspread. She told Jim about this and they agreed to confront Donna together the following day. That evening, they went to a party hosted by Patricia's best friend, Toinette. According to Toinette, she could immediately tell something was wrong. Patricia pulled her aside and began a disturbing conversation. She told Toinette that something was very wrong, but she couldn't go into details at that time because it was too complicated. Patricia ended the conversation by asking Toinette to cancel her upcoming vacation. She wanted to go away with her friends somewhere together so that she could explain everything. She also asked Toinette to look after her children, no matter what happened. The day of Patricia's disappearance started like any other. Patricia left the house at 8:30 a.m., setting the alarm as she did so. Nobody at her work noticed anything out of the ordinary, other than that Patricia seemed a little bit quiet that day. While she was away, something tripped the house alarm. The security company tried to contact Patricia and Jim, but neither could answer their phones at work. They went to Patricia's mother, who left a voicemail asking if everything was all right. The police were also contacted, but they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at the house. When Patricia returned home from work, she returned the call to her mother. Everything was fine, and she assumed the front door hadn't closed properly, triggering the alarm. She later called Toinette, but didn't say anything about the strange conversations the day before. She just wanted information about a gift she was planning to buy for Jim for Valentine's Day. Shortly after getting off the phone with Toinette, Patricia confronted Donna. She was extremely angry and behaved completely out of character by shouting at her sister-in-law. By 1:11 p.m., Patricia reset the alarm. This was something the Violas only did when they left the house or when they went to bed. A little over 3 hours later, Jim returned home from work. He found all Patricia's belongings at home, including her epilepsy medication, but no sign of Patricia at all. When she hadn't returned home by that evening, Jim contacted the police. Searches of the surrounding area took place, but no traces of Patricia were found. There were a few alleged sightings, but all were ruled out. In July of 2002, a small bone fragment was found on a beach in Queens, New York. Police searches also found a shoe, but no other remains, and it would take years before DNA could be extracted from the bones, and it wasn't until 2012 that testing confirmed the bones belonged to Patricia. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough to reveal any insights about what happened to Patricia, other than she had somehow ended up in the Atlantic Ocean. Number 7. Cheryl Coker was a 46-year-old mother of 2 when she vanished in 2018. Over a year later, her remains were found not far from her home. The police suspected foul play, and during the investigation, it emerged that Cheryl had revealed a secret about her husband just before she vanished. Cheryl and Bill Coker had been married for almost 20 years by 2018. From the outside, the relationship seemed to be completely normal, but the two had both been seeing people outside the marriage. It had started years earlier when Cheryl caught her husband having an affair. They agreed to open their marriage, and both had been seeing other people. They set up rules for their other relationships. The extramarital activities weren't supposed to be lasting relationships where they developed feelings for the other person, and they weren't going to tell friends and family about the open marriage. The Cokers continued with this situation for several years, until Cheryl discovered her husband had broken one of these rules. He'd started a relationship with a coworker, and Cheryl discovered text messages where Bill told the girlfriend he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. Cheryl confronted her husband, who admitted to the relationship. He didn't want a divorce, though. Cheryl agreed to remain married if he broke off the relationship, which Bill refused to do. And it was at that point that Cheryl began to tell others about the secret. Cheryl told friends and family about the affair. She also allegedly informed Bill's work about the affair, and according to Bill, this led to him being demoted. On November 2nd, 2018, Cheryl had dropped her daughter off at school, then returned home. She made some posts on Facebook, and her phone pings placed her at her home that she still shared with her soon-to-be ex-husband in Riverside, Ohio. Her last activity was at 7:45 a.m. Throughout the day, Cheryl's daughter and sister tried to call her but received no response. When her daughter returned home from school, there was no sign of Cheryl at home. Her sister reported her missing that evening. Bill had apparently not noticed that Cheryl was missing. Cheryl's daughter used the Find My Phone app to locate Cheryl's phone in her car, which had been parked at a nearby bar. CCTV from the area showed a man dressed in all black with his hood up in the area around the time the car was dropped off. He was also later seen walking towards the Coker home. Later in the day, Bill went to a store near where Cheryl's car was found. Not only did he not notice the vehicle, but CCTV found that he was wearing extremely similar shoes to the individual who seemingly dropped it off. He also had a wound on his elbow, which he claimed was from an accident driving a forklift, which he didn't report at work. Cheryl's friends and family, as well as the police, conducted many searches for Cheryl, but it wouldn't be until April of 2020 that her remains were located. They were discovered by a mushroom hunter in a rural area roughly 15 minutes from the Coker home. The state of the remains meant that the cause of Cheryl's passing couldn't be determined, but the police believed it was foul play. Bill Coker was already a prime suspect, but the police have not been able to gather enough evidence to bring him to trial. Number 6. In the early days of the pandemic in China, the state tried to keep the reality of what was going on in the outbreak's epicenter a top secret. State-controlled media repeated the official version of events, but some believed it was important that the rest of China and the rest of the world knew what was really going on in Wuhan. Many of these citizen journalists would disappear without warning. Chen Qiushi was one of the most well-known citizen journalists to vanish while uncovering secrets in Wuhan. Qiushi had started his career as a lawyer, but always had dreams of becoming a TV news commentator. To To get some experience, he started covering news independently, starting with the Ganju flood disaster in 2019. Chushi next headed to Hong Kong to cover the protests there. He reported exactly what he saw on the ground. His reporting again attracted the attention of thousands of Chinese citizens, but also the government, who spoke with Chushi when he returned to mainland. His videos were deleted from Chinese social media. In January of 2020, Wuhan was put under a state-controlled lockdown, officially to try to control the spread of the virus that had originated there. This was despite reports that the illness had been appearing for months at this point. The day after the lockdown was implemented, Chushi decided to travel to Wuhan to report on what was really happening there. He found horrifying scenes that were not being covered by China's official news agencies. Hospitals and funeral homes were both overcrowded. People were trying to care for sick relatives or the bodies of those who'd already passed, but there was nowhere to go. All this was being kept a secret from the rest of China and the rest of the world. Chushi didn't only report on negative aspects, but also mentioned that the price of goods was staying stable. But the scenes he had witnessed in the hospital were obviously taking an emotional toll on him. But he vowed to continue reporting as long as he was alive, and said he would continue to report other stories after the coronavirus had passed. Chushi's family last heard from him on February 6, 2020. He was going to report at a temporary hospital. When they didn't hear from him for hours, his family turned to social media to ask if anybody knew what had happened to him. His friends had access to Chushi's social media channels and kept his fans updated, but there was little they could say. Eventually, authorities arrived at the Chen family home to ask questions about Chushi. They told his parents he'd been forced into quarantine, but when they asked where he was or why he didn't have access to his phone, they wouldn't respond. Months passed. It was unclear if Chushi had been detained or charged, and nobody could speak to him. His parents stopped talking to the media or human rights groups, as they worried that this would only make Chushi's situation worse. Finally, in September of 2021, Chushi re-emerged on social media. On the 24th, a good friend posted to his YouTube channel, saying that Chushi was in good health but was still under government supervision. A few days later, Chushi himself posted a letter to his Twitter account where he admitted that he couldn't talk about much that had happened to him in the past 600 days. He did say he was struggling with some mental health issues, and MMA had helped him deal with this. He'd be hosting a charity boxing match at the end of the year. He also appeared on a friend's YouTube channel repeating the same message. And since then, Chushi has mostly kept out of the public eye. Number 5. The disappearance of Evaristo Ortega Zarate is one without a lot of information available to the public, but it's a familiar story in Veracruz, Mexico. Evaristo is one of dozens of journalists to have disappeared or had their lives taken in the state since 2003. In Evaristo's case, he officially remains missing, and no trace of him has ever been found. Evaristo was last seen on April 19, 2010. He was in a white Hummer on his way to the Veracruz State Hospital when the car was stopped by a patrol officer. The official reason why Evaristo was stopped was never revealed, but police officers forced Evaristo into their car. Thinking quickly, he sent 3 text messages to his sister. "Tell everyone, they're taking us on patrol to Veracruz. They're taking us into custody." According to one source, he may also have placed a short phone call to Alba Leonila Mendez Herrera, a politician and member of the National Action Party. When she answered the phone, all Herrera heard were screams and the sound of someone being hit. She believed it was a joke. He'd only been seen by other party members minutes earlier, but it was extremely serious. Evaristo had started his journalism career years earlier. In 2004, he founded a weekly newspaper, Espacio, with his friend Angel Cruz. His friend passed away from stomach cancer the following year, but Evaristo kept the newspaper going. He reported on stories that were important to the local community, including cases of government corruption and the activities of criminal organizations that were a serious problem in the region. Espacio went from strength to strength and was being printed in color. Evaristo wanted to make a difference in his community, and reporting accurately on things that powerful people wanted to be kept secret seemed like one of the best ways to do that. More recently, Evaristo had become involved in politics, seeing this as another way of making things better. He joined the National Action Party and had aspirations of running for mayor of Kolipa, the town where he had been born. At the time of his disappearance, Evaristo was a pre-candidate for the position. On the morning of his disappearance, Evaristo had gone to breakfast at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Kolipa, then to a meeting at the party headquarters. He left the meeting around noon. Only a few minutes later, his sister would receive the disturbing texts. After reporting Evaristo missing, it became clear there was no official record of his arrest. It was possible that he'd been taken by a group pretending to be police officers, but his family feared the people responsible may actually have been working for the police. Evaristo remains missing to this day, and no trace of him has ever been found. Number 4. The disappearance of Calvin Michael Anderson is unfortunately another missing person case without much public information. But the circumstances leading up to Anderson's disappearance seemed to indicate there was a lot more to the story than has ever been revealed. Anderson was only 25 years old when he vanished without a trace in 1974. He was last seen on June 17th at approximately 1:30 p.m., leaving a house in Iron River, Michigan. He was with another young man, Richard Kylanen. Normally, Anderson and Kylanen being put together wouldn't be anything too strange. The two men had been friends for years, but things had changed recently. Kylanen had been having an affair with Anderson's wife. Anderson had separated from his wife and moved out of the family home, only for Kylanen to move in shortly after. The exact nature of their relationship after this is unclear, but it would be understandable if the two didn't get along. On top of this, Anderson was due to testify against his former friend, revealing information they'd kept secret for years. 3 years earlier, in December of 1971, 3 buildings were broken into at a hunting camp near Iron River. After the break-ins, the buildings had been set on fire. 2 were completely burned down. The damages were estimated to reach $10,000. A few weeks after the incident, Anderson and Kylanen were both arrested. Anderson was charged with breaking and entering, while Kylanen had the same charges as well as arson. But there didn't seem to be much evidence in the case. Eventually, Anderson agreed to testify against Kylanen, and it seems his testimony was crucial to the case against his former friend. When Anderson vanished, the case did not go ahead. Anderson was never seen or heard from after June of 1974. Kylanen was the prime suspect in Anderson's disappearance, but he refused to do any polygraph tests and would provide no information about his former friend's whereabouts. Years later, Kylanen was charged with an attack against his wife. Shortly after this, the police investigating Anderson's disappearance reclassified the case. They no longer believed he was alive and now suspected foul play in his disappearance. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Michigan State Police at 906-265-2034. Number 3. On November 24th, Denise Costco waited at a station with her father for her mother to arrive. They'd been spending time together as a family after a long separation. But Denise had spent the day visiting relatives. Leah Garafalo would never arrive and was never seen again, and Denise knew exactly the reason why. Leah had been born into a branch of the Italian Mafia, but she didn't want this life for herself, and she married a farmer named Carlo Costco. He concealed the fact that he was also involved in organized crime, and his marriage to her would put him in good standing with the Mafia. The couple had a daughter together. At some point, fighting began between the Garafalo and Costco families. Her brother-in-law attacked Leah's own brother, Floriano, who was a boss within the Mafia organization. Even before this happened, Leah knew that she needed to get herself and her daughter out of the situation. In 2002, she started to break the silence, talking to Italian authorities about the activities of her family. She was taken into witness protection along with her daughter. It was an extremely stressful ordeal. Leah had to leave behind everyone she had ever known and was kept isolated in the various safe houses where she tried to live. She provided lots of evidence to the authorities, revealing secrets of the organization. But for unexplained reasons, the authorities didn't believe her evidence was particularly valuable. She was briefly removed from witness protection and had to appeal to be let back in. Even when this appeal was approved, she now doubted the program's ability to keep herself and her daughter safe. She told Denise that their only options were either to go to Australia to start a new life for themselves or to reconcile with Costco. Leah chose the latter. In 2009, she exited the protection program, but tried to stay in the same area so Denise could continue her schooling. Costco seemed happy to forgive his wife and try to move on with their lives together. He even helped to find her a new home, but all the while, he was trying to organize her kidnapping. In May of 2009, an attempted kidnapping of Leah failed because Denise was home. In November, Costco lured Leah and Denise to Milan, feigning discussions about Denise's university future. Once Leah and Denise were separated, Costco and his brothers kidnapped Leah. Costco took her life with a cord, leaving his family to dispose of the body, which was later burned. Denise reported her mother missing, knowing that her father was responsible. In October of 2010, Denise actually testified against her father, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. Heidi Allen was 18 years old when she vanished without a trace in 1994. One person has been convicted of her disappearance. In appeals, it emerged that Heidi may have been an informant for the police, passing on secret information that could have made her a target. Heidi was working at a gas station in New Haven, New York at the time of her disappearance. The day of April 3rd, 1994 started like any other. It was Easter Sunday, but she woke up early to open the gas station. According to receipts, Heidi's last customer came at 7:42 a.m. Just 16 minutes later, a customer flagged down a county sheriff on patrol to report that the gas station was unattended. Heidi was nowhere to be seen. Searches for Heidi began immediately, and the local news reported on the case on the same day. Elsewhere in the town, Richard Thibodeau was celebrating Easter with his family when he saw the reports. He'd been Heidi's last customer, so he contacted the police to help with the investigation. He told them Heidi was alive and well when he left. Richard and most other people in New Haven joined the search for Heidi, but no trace of her was ever found. One witness reported seeing two men wrestle a young woman into a blue or white van. Another said they saw a blue or white van being driven erratically, as if the driver was fighting with someone. This matched descriptions of Richard's van. Months after Heidi vanished, Richard was arrested. His brother Gary was also arrested. Heidi was a tall woman who did a lot of sports, and it was theorized that she would have been able to fight off one of the Thibodeau brothers, or at least leave behind evidence of a scuffle. There would need to be two people to conduct the kidnapping. According to two jailhouse informants, Gary Thibodeau had confessed to the crime. He was involved in illegal substances and had a connection to Heidi through that. He allegedly told them that she was buried in a place the police would never find. Richard and Gary were tried separately. Gary Thibodeau was found guilty of the kidnapping, but Richard was found not guilty. Heidi's family hoped that the conviction would lead to the location of her remains being found, but that never happened. Gary Thibodeau continued to claim he was innocent and would do so until he passed away in 2018. The case went cold, but around 2013, there was a new witness. A woman claimed that a man named James Steen had confessed to the crime years earlier. He told her that the other two men had kidnapped Heidi because she was, quote, a rat. Years later, the witness told police Steen had confessed to killing his partner, Vicky West, who also heard the confession. This corroborated the confession. Thibodeau appealed based on this new evidence. His defense found more. Heidi Allen had confessed to being a police informant, helping with illegal substance crimes. Police claimed Heidi contacted them. A note card with her details and photo, labeling her as an informant, was found outside her workplace 2 years before she vanished, and someone nefarious might have seen it. Police said that they never used Heidi as an informant, but many believe that she shared secrets with them. Her disappearances linked to this is unknown. Both Thibodeau and Steen were involved in illegal substances, which was a possible motive. Thibodeau's appeal eventually failed and he passed away in prison, and Heidi's body remains missing. Number 1. Katz Falk told co-workers that she was onto something big as she investigated a case of weapons smuggling in Sweden in the 1980s. Her reports on whatever secrets she uncovered would never be published after she vanished suddenly in November of 1984. Her remains, and the remains of a friend she was with, were found months later, but the discovery only raised more questions than answers. Katz was born Maureen Catherine Harriet Falk in Stockholm, Sweden. She had aspirations of becoming a foreign correspondent for TV news. About a year before she vanished, she began working for the Swedish public service television news program Report. Katz still wasn't particularly well known by 1984. She was working on a story that she believed would earn her prizes in journalism. She had told her coworkers she was on to something big, but didn't share any details. On November 10, 1984, Katz went out to dinner with her friend Lena Grans. The two women were last seen at a restaurant in Stockholm, and they had plans to meet up with a friend, but never made it to that second location. And after leaving the restaurant that night, neither woman was seen alive again. A search for Katz immediately began, as did the speculation about what might have happened to her. The police theorized that they might have gotten into an accident, as Lena's car was also missing, but many others suspected foul play. At the time of her disappearance, Katz was investigating the Swedish company ASEA, which had allegedly been selling computers and software to the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia. In 1984, information about this conspiracy was just beginning to come to light. One of the key people behind the plot was West German Richard Muller, who had disappeared before he could face justice. It would later emerge that he'd fled behind the Iron Curtain, but this information wasn't commonly known in 1984. Some theorized that Katz might have known more about this than her notes suggested. As it was, the police found nothing in Katz's notes that couldn't be learned from other public sources. There was another case that Katz may have been investigating. This involved another Swedish company, Bofors, selling weaponry to East Germany. This weaponry was then supplied to Iran. In 1984, this was being investigated by the authorities, but it was not as big a story in Sweden. In May of 1985, military divers on a routine exercise found Lena's car at the bottom of the Hammarby Canal. This was an area the police divers had already searched extensively, based on a theory that the car had ended up in the water. Katz and Lena were found inside the car, both wearing the clothes they were last seen in. This seemed to confirm the police theory about a tragic accident, but there were a few details about the location of the car that seemed suspicious. The case went cold until a letter was eventually sent to the Swedish Security Service from Germany in 1997. The letter alleged that a hit team hired by the East German government had traveled to Sweden and was behind the disappearance. Katz and Lena had allegedly been poisoned at the restaurant, then put into the car, which was pushed into the water. Investigations into the Bofors case had prompted the attack. The German police would eventually arrest one man on suspicion of being part of this team, but there was never enough evidence to bring charges against him. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.